The film starts by showing a group of Fire Nation guards running after a man who seemed to have brought something with him. The man was revealed to be an earthbender and was weighted by another person, ready to run away from the chaser. But in the last seconds, the man was struck by fire and dropped the item he was bringing. Knowing there was no chance for them both to escape, he threw the item he brought, none other than the Fire Nation's war plan, to his friend and sacrificed himself to buy time for his friend to flee. Unfortunately, the guards were too much for him, and he was immediately arrested, brought to face Fire Lord Sozin himself, the ruling Fire Lord at that moment. The man threatened them that the Earth Kingdom would be ready for their attack, but Fire Lord Sozin told them that the war plan the man stole from them was a mere trap, and that by letting the Earth Kingdom take it, it would put the whole world's attention to them, except for the Fire Nation, whose attention was nothing but a single individual, none other than the Avatar himself, the master of 4 elements that kept the peace within the 4 nations, though wasn't been revealed until that moment, was destined to be born from the air nomads. Thus killing them all would be their plan to stop the Avatar from being reincarnated. Somewhere else at the air nomads temple, everyone was working on the preparations for the incoming Comet Festival. One of them was Aang, a 12-year-old airbender prodigy. One of the monks there, Monk Gyatso, called him to help with the preparations, but soon after, another air nomads from other temples came with their sky bisons and took their attention. When Aang left, another monk came and told Monk Gyatso to come with him for a meeting with the other monks. Turned out, Aang was destined to be the next Avatar, and Monk Gyatso was told to tell Aang about his role, but he hadn't done his task because Aang wasn't ready for that, and he had to learn more before taking his role as the Avatar. One of them said that there was no time for that since the Fire Nation and their Fire Lord, Sozin, were ready to launch their attack to conquer the world. The Avatar was the only one who could stand in their way and stop the war, so the whole world was in dire need of the new Avatar. Monk Sutop, the senior monk there, said that Aang had to leave to begin his training in the other bending discipline before the war started. After that meeting, Monk Gyatso met Aang and finally told him everything. He told Aang why he received his markings in front of Avatar Yangshan's statue instead of in the main hall, like the others, was because he was destined to be the bearer of the next Avatar's soul. Aang was shocked to know that and refused the responsibility. He wasn't ready to leave home. This thing kept him thinking all night, so he went outside and met Appa, his sky bison. He rumbled about Monk Gyatso, telling him to leave to learn from other disciplines, the burden of being the Avatar, and the loneliness of being the keeper of the world's peace. He wasn't ready to leave and was too sad to be apart from Monk Gyatso. He then took Appa with him and flew from the temple to clear his thoughts. Not far from there, Fire Lord Sozin and his army were ready to attack the place. They were ready to slaughter everyone. One of the monks realized that and alerted everyone. While the other monks were battling against the attack, Gyatso took all the children to hide. He was afraid because Aang wasn't there with the other children. On the other hand, Aang was trying to escape the storm with Appa. The war at the temple was brutal. Every single monk was killed, leaving Gyatso and the children in the main hall. Fire Lord Sozin knew they were still alive and came to finish them all. Gyatso tried his best to fight back, but the firebenders were stronger because of the upcoming comet that doubled their strength. Gyatso and every other soul were killed that night, leaving Aang and Appa, who were drowned in the sea during the storm. That was the moment his Avatar soul took control of his body and saved him. A very long time had passed. Somewhere in Wolf Cove, the Water Tribe settlement, a girl who seemed to be a waterbender was trying to control the water. Her name is Katara. Shortly after, she returned to the village and met his brother, Sokka, who told her that they had to go fish. While canoeing through the ice water, Sokka confronted her about her waterbending. He was worried that the Fire Nation would find out that she was a waterbender, though the Fire Nation hadn't been there for years. Suddenly, a strong current began forming and their boat was pulled, and before they could control it, they crashed into an iceberg. There, they realized the strange round ice formation in front of them. Somewhere else, a ship belonging to the Fire Nation was sailing. Katara tried to control the water below the canoe to bring it back to them, but at the same time, the iceberg cracked and a blinding beam came out from it, along with Aang, with his markings shining too. The Fire Nation's ship saw it too, and a man with a burning mark on his face was enthusiastic to see it. Katara decided to bring Aang home, and when Gran, Katara's great-grandmother, saw him, she realized that the child lying unconscious in front of him was an airbender. Nobody believed her because airbenders had vanished for so long. They decided to wait for Aang to wake up to find the truth. In the Fire Nation ship, the man with a burning mark on his face, who turned out to be the Fire Nation prince, Zuko, talked with his uncle, Iroh, that they had to look for the nearest water tribe settlement to find the Avatar. Feeling the beam was a sign of the Avatar himself, but his uncle denied that it was a sign. It was revealed that Zuko had been banished by his father, the new Fire Lord, to find the Avatar, and that he wanted to finish his tasks so he could be the rightful heir of the kingdom. Aang finally woke up and realized that Appa was nowhere near him. Sokka was the first to see him awake. Katara and Gran showed up soon after. After blowing his whistle, Appa finally came. Aang then brought to talk with the rest of the tribe. There, Gran told him about the story of the vanished Avatar from 100 years ago, and the fact that the air nomads had vanished from the world. Knowing that he was the last airbender alive, Aang was shocked and left. Katara found him sitting on the roof and tried to cheer him. She told him the story of the Fire Nation attack against their tribe and her father who left for the war 3 years ago, leaving Sokka to look after the village. Katara told him that the nations had turned their faces against each other. Katara brought Aang to the abandoned Fire Nation ship near the village and showed him that she was one of the waterbenders, though she wasn't good enough to do anything. Aang told him to feel the energy and balancing it. Katara then tried it and was finally able to control the water, but then she saw the incoming ship belonging to Zuko. She returned to the village and found Sokka getting ready for a fight. They wondered why Fire Nation returned to their village after years, and Gran told them that what they wanted was Aang. She revealed the fact that Aang was the missing Avatar. Sokka was mad knowing Aang was the missing Avatar that was supposed to save them. Katara then took Aang to hide, but Zuko had arrived and Sokka wasn't enough to hold him. Aang showed up and fought him. Zuko and his army tried to burn the entire place, and An made the decision to turn himself in for the villagers' safety. Before they left, Aang told Sokka how brave he was, and that was enough to convince Sokka to save him from Zuko. He told the second oldest boy in the village to keep the village safe, and then prepared to leave with Katara to run after Aang and Zuko. Iroh met Aang for the first time inside the prison. Aang told him the reason behind the war done by the Fire Nation, and Iroh told him the beliefs that most of the firebenders believed, that the war they started was to bring nothing but peace. Aang opposed it, saying that bringing peace didn't start by conquering and killing. He then asked if Iroh also believed in that belief, but Iroh chose not to tell anything. Before he left, Iroh told Aang that he had prepared a jasmine tea for him. Fortunately, when the guard turned his gaze, Aang used his airbending to snatch the cell key from him. Katara and Sokka were ready to leave, but they knew it would be enough to catch a ship with their canoe, so Katara had the idea to hop on Appa. On the other hand, Aang managed to get out of the cell and accidentally entered Zuko's room. There he found Zuko's book containing information about the Avatar and his flying stick. After snatching them, he jumped out of the ship to escape, but Zuko saw him and ordered his army to open fire. Aang was hit by the fireball, but Sokka was on time to catch him. Zuko tried to launch another fireball, but Katara made a shocking move by waterbending and stopped the fireball. Knowing they would endanger everyone's safety if they returned to the village, they decided to go to the Sur Temple where Aang used to live. Sadly, when they arrived, Aang saw the ruins of the place he called home, and later witnessed with his own eyes the remains of Monk Gyatso, his beloved friend. He couldn't control his anger, and the Avatar soul took over his body and caused a tornado. Katara shouted to stop his Avatar state from destroying anything, but Aang wasn't hearing. That moment, Aang remembered what Monk Gyatso told him, that he was the perfect one to bear the role of the Avatar, and that he would always be his friend. That brought Aang back to his senses, though he wasn't sure of what just happened to him. Katara hugged him to calm him down. After that, Aang finally accepted his fate as the Avatar. Meanwhile, Zuko drew Aang's face on a piece of paper and finally had the image of what he was looking for. Zuko finally realized that his book containing information he gathered about the Avatar had gone missing. Iroh tried to calm him down and told him they had the advantage of knowing where to find the Avatar. Meanwhile, Aang had decided to go to Kyoshi Island, the home of Avatar Kyoshi, but Sokka thought that it was their time to return home since they had saved Aang from Zuko, but Katara refused because she wanted to help Aang reach his goal of becoming the Avatar and save the world. Katara convinced her brother that it was the right choice to follow Aang, and she refused to go back. Aang saw Katara's bag moving on its own and tried to catch it. When Katara picked it up, a winged lemur came out from it and flew to the nearest tree. There, Katara also found a scroll and a letter from Gran, saying that she had kept the scroll and heirloom passed by generations away from Katara, and since Katara had begun her journey, she decided to give it to her for her to master. Upon reading that, Sokka was convinced to follow Aang to Kyoshi Island. Before leaving, Aang took the time to make a proper funeral for Monk Gyatso. After that, they left from there. Aang also took the winged lemur he met there and named it Momo. Iroh took Zuko to dock at a port that belonged to the Fire Nation regional headquarters to seek information. Zuko was surprised, knowing his uncle decided to ask a fire commander about the Avatar, and afraid that if they began their search party too, he would lose his chance to catch the Avatar. But Iroh told him that they could find information without spoiling their reason, which was to find the Avatar. Aang, Katara, and Sokka finally reached Kyoshi Island. There, they found a statue of Avatar Kyoshi, but when Sokka entered the statue, they were ambushed by a couple of guards. Katara tried to convince the guards that Aang was the Avatar, but they refused to believe her since there was no sign that he was the real Avatar. But suddenly, a reflection shone upon Aang, and they were finally convinced. Aang and the others were then brought to the village to meet the chief, but upon the meeting, the chief didn't seem to believe that Aang was the Avatar, saying that a mere reflection was not enough as a sign. Aang tried to convince her that he was there to seek information about Avatar Kyoshi. The Avatar represented that place, but to no avail, she was not convinced, until the leader of the guard, Suki, who turned out to be her daughter, asked her to believe what they said and let them look through the information they had about the Avatar. She decided to give them 2 days. After the meeting, Sokka thanked Suki for helping them convincing her mother to let them stay. Sokka told her that he was also the guardian of his village and a warrior. Suki told him that they were not the same. She was a trained Kyoshi warrior, a warrior trained by Avatar Kyoshi herself. Zuko, on the other hand, along with Iroh, finally met the commander of the headquarters, Commander Zhao, and asked him to provide maps and recent surveillance reports. Commander Zhao knew that Zuko was hiding something. The next day, Suki came to meet Sokka to tell him that the village had prepared food for them. Meanwhile, Katara was practicing her waterbending when Aang showed up. Katara asked him to practice together, but Aang refused. He had trained with and only with Monk Gyatso and thought it didn't feel right to train with someone else. Hearing that, Katara didn't force him to comply. They then went to eat, and Aang was greeted by the children of the village. While he was playing with the kids, Suki and her mother saw him. Her mother told her that it was better to have them out of the island sooner, afraid that he would be a danger to the island. On the other hand, Commander Zhao got a report from his subordinate that Zuko had found the Avatar and asked them about recent surveillance, thinking the Avatar was still in the area. He then told his subordinate, Lieutenant Dang, to gather any reports of recent unusual sightings. After breakfast, Sokka decided to train with his boomerang. Suki approached him and showed Sokka her combat ability. Meanwhile, Aang and Katara went to the Avatar Kyoshi statue to find information from the books there, but to no avail. Aang almost gave up. He never wanted the burden. He knew he was strong, but he didn't want the power that sent fear to people around him. Katara realized that the Avatars were there for Aang. They were inside him, waiting for him, and he just needed to find a way to reach them. Meanwhile, Zuko saw that Commander Zhao and his ship had gone. He realized that they had found out about the Avatar and were on their way to capture him. Later that day, Sokka saw Suki training the other Kyoshi warriors and decided to visit. After the others left, Sokka and Suki trained together and shared a romantic moment. On the other hand, Aang decided to meditate in front of Avatar Kyoshi's statue and finally reached a trance state and met Avatar Kyoshi. Sokka and Sukai had finished their training when suddenly the bell was heard, alarming someone was coming. Soon, Commander Zhao and his troops arrived and asked them about someone who didn't belong to the place, referring to the Avatar and his entourage, but the village chiefs said that they hadn't received any visitors lately. Meanwhile, Zoku finally reached Kyoshi Island, but he saw Commander Zhao's ship had docked at the beach. He was hopeless, knowing Commander Zhao might have reached the village, but Iroh told him that the commander and his troops might have not found the Avatar yet. He was sure the Avatar wasn't at the village, but at the statue of Avatar Kyoshi. Commander Zhao refused to believe what the village chief told him and asked permission to check for themselves. The chief let him do what he wanted, but then she and the Kyoshi warriors attacked them. Somewhere else, Zuko and his troops were on their way to the statue to catch the Avatar. Katara saw them and tried to wake Aang up, but it was in vain. Aang himself was talking with Avatar Kyoshi. He asked what it meant to be the Avatar and how he could become one. Avatar Kyoshi told him that being the Avatar meant being a mighty and merciless warrior who put his duties above anything. She then showed Aang what might happen if he failed. At the village, a war between the Kyoshi warriors and the fire troops was happening. On the other hand, Katara confronted Zuko and his troops to stop him from capturing Aang. Meanwhile, Avatar Kyoshi told Aang that the island was in danger and decided to show him what the power of the Avatar state was. She took control of Aang's body, showed herself as the Avatar Kyoshi, and stopped Zuko, who was about to beat Katara. She then jumped right in the middle of the village and fought Commander Zhao and his troops without the slightest difficulty. Commander Zhao realized what he was looking at and decided to pull back his troops. The whole village, including the chief, saw Avatar Kyoshi turn back into Aang and realized that her assumption of him was wrong. She bowed and apologized. Meanwhile, Sokka and Sukai had to part ways. Suki gave him a goodbye kiss, revealing her feelings towards him. Aang decided to leave for the Northern Water Tribe, knowing something terrible would happen there, and he was the only one who could save them. Later that day, on their way back to the headquarters, Zuko asked Commander Zhao not to tell anyone about the Avatar. Commander Zhao complied and even offered help to capture the Avatar and provide anything needed for the mission. Zuko almost refused, if not because Iroh immediately accepted the help, but without them knowing, Commander Zhao betrayed them and wrote a letter straight to the ruling Fire Lord Ozai, that Zuko had found the Avatar. One night at the capital, a group of people plotted to kill Fire Lord Ozai. The leader brought someone who worked at the palace and managed to convince the others to start their mission. They then sneaked into the palace and reached the Fire Lord's hall, but they were ambushed. The Fire Lord had found out their plan from the woman the leader brought, who was none other than the daughter of the Fire Lord, Princess Azula. The leader of the group knew they wouldn't make it out, but they already knew that the Avatar would come and save the world for them. Fire Lord Ozai had heard enough and ignited them all on fire. Azula was surprised to hear about the Avatar, though she didn't believe it until her father gave her the letter he received from Commander Zhao. Somewhere inside a forest, Katara was practicing another waterbending technique, but she couldn't get the hang of it. Aang tried to help, but he wasn't much help either, proving their point that they should get to the Northern Water Tribe to find a teacher there for them both. They then continued their journey, and on their way, they saw what seemed to be another airbender, heading to Omashu, a city, part of the Earth Kingdom. At the same time, Zuko, Iroh, and Commander Zhao were trying to figure out where the Avatar was heading. Commander Zhao suggested they contact his trusted person to find more information. Though Zuko refused initially, Commander Zhao convinced him that there was nothing to worry about and that he wouldn't say anything unnecessary. Aang and the others finally reached the city of Omashu, the second biggest city of the Earth Kingdom, carved out of a mountain. Aang told them that the city had a unique transport line that connected the whole part of it. They had to wait in a long line before they could enter. There, they were told by a passerby that the guards were not going to let outsiders enter the city, which thanks to that, Omashu was one of the last strongholds the Earth Kingdom had. Katara managed to get the boys' help to help them get inside the city, and by disguising themselves, the guards were convinced enough to let them pass. Once they entered the city, Ing saw the airbender he had seen earlier and ran after him. The boy was Tio, and he was not an airbender, but he could fly using a machine made by his father. Just a moment after they met, an explosion happened nearby. Ing used his airbending to clear the smoke, and Katara used her waterbending to extinguish the fire. Sai, Tio's father, showed up and took them to his house. Tio told them that the bombing was not an accident, but rather another attempt to attack the city by the Fire Nation. Their spies were everywhere in the city, and nowhere was safe. Tio then introduced his father, the mechanic who maintained the transport line in the city and was an excellent thinker. After hearing all that, Ing said goodbye and decided to leave immediately, but when he saw how people in the city were suffering from the tragedy, he made up his mind to stay in Omashu and help the people there. He returned to Tio's house and gathered information. Tio told him that the bombers were gathered in the mountains near the city, and they had the chance to get there using Ing's airbending. Zoku, on the other hand, received information that an airbender was seen in Omashu and was ready to get there. Commander Zhao suggested hiring his trusted person to find the Avatar, but Zuko refused it outright, saying that he and Iroh would be the ones visiting Omashu to find the Avatar. The next day, Katara was practicing her waterbending when she saw Sai talking with someone in a hood. When she was about to confront him, the boy who helped her enter the city the other day showed up and stopped her, revealing that Sai was the Fire Nation's spy. They then followed the man with the hood to the forest. When they arrived, the man knew that they were following and was waiting to fight them, but thankfully, Katara and the boy also had a backup and managed to beat the firebenders. The man then introduced himself as Jet. Back in the kingdom, Sokka was helping Sai design his hot air balloon. Sai praised him for his knowledge. Meanwhile, Ing and Tio had arrived at the bombers' hideout and found the truth that it wasn't the firebenders who made the bombs, but someone else. Jet brought Katara to his hideout in the forest, and there they talked about their past. Jet said that his mother was the one who taught him how to use swords, but then he had to lose his mother when the Fire Nation attacked their village. Katara shared the moment she cherished with her mother and Jet, told her to use it to help her control her waterbending. It worked as she managed to pull the new technique she had difficulty learning. Zoku, on the other hand, had arrived at Omashu with Iroh. Meanwhile, Azula sent a letter to Commander Zhao, asking him to keep her informed about Zuko's mission of pursuing the Avatar. After reading the letter, Commander Zhao told Lieutenant Dang to find Lieutenant Ji, a part of Zuko's crew, who told him about the Avatar. Ing returned to Sei's house to tell Sokka what he and Tio found. He was about to tell him that he knew who the bombers were when suddenly, Katara barged in and told them that she knew who the bomber was. Ing told them that Jet was the bomber, but Katara denied it. She said that Sai was the bad guy, and she saw him talking with the Fire Nation's spy. Sokka and Aang tried to convince her that Jet was nothing but a con artist, and was lying, but she refused to believe them and left to find Jet. She went to the market, and without her knowing, she passed by Zuko. She finally found Jet, and was told that they were carrying on a mission to blow the Earth King along with Sai, who was about to meet him. He revealed that he was the mastermind behind the bombing, and said that the casualties were nothing but a sacrifice for freedom, proving Sokka's point that Jet was the bad guy all along. Katara returned to Sei's house and told Sokka and Aang that they were right about Jet. They then rushed to the palace, only to be stopped by Zuko and Iroh. Aang told them to leave to save the king while he would fight Zuko. Zuko wasn't using his firebending, and yet he could match Aang. Their fight caused a commotion around the market, and the sellers weren't happy about it, especially since Zuko was fighting a child. Meanwhile, Sokka and Katara saw the transport line was the fastest way to reach the palace and jumped right into it. Aang accidentally revealed that he stole Zuko's notebook, triggering Zuko's anger. He used his firebending in anger and revealed his real identity as a firebender. The sellers screamed in terror. Meanwhile, Sokka and Katara managed to get to the palace in time. They saw Jet's friend about to shoot a fire arrow toward the case that Sai brought. Katara acted quickly by using her waterbending. She put down the fire and avoided the explosion, though the guards were alerted that the king was being attacked. At the market, Iroh found Zuko, who was still trying to chase Aang. He stopped him and told him to run away, while he directed the guard's attention with his firebending to buy time for Zuko to run away. Meanwhile, Aang tried to put down the fire, but the guards arrested him. He was brought to the prison inside the palace, surrounded by solid rock everywhere. He found Iroh too in there. In Sei's house, Sokka confronted Sei about his cooperation with the Fire Nation's spy, and Sei revealed that he was forced to do it to ensure Tio's safety, and that the minor help provided by him for the Fire Nation was enough to keep them from attacking Omashu. Katara came soon after, telling everyone that Aang was put in prison. Meanwhile, Zuko had found out about his uncle being imprisoned, and after snatching one of the Earth Kingdom's guards' uniform, he went straight to save Iroh. Aang asked Iroh why Zuko kept chasing after him, and learned that Zuko did that to get his life back. Shortly after, the guards took Iroh to the pit, a place where the prisoners were put. Nobody ever returned from there. Meanwhile, Aang was told that the king wanted to see him. Back to Sokka, he asked Sai how to reach the prison. Sai said that it was impenetrable. The only way was through the heavily guarded palace. Tio suddenly mentioned a secret tunnel lying beneath the mountain that connected the palace and the outside. Sai said that it was a mere fairy tale, but Tio mentioned that Sei once said that he ever saw the tunnel. Sai was forced to tell the truth about the tunnel. While Sokka was checking the map for the tunnel, Sei received a message from his Fire Nation contact. Sokka had an idea to set a trap to capture them, but Sai was too scared. Tio told him to set the trap, and had made up his mind to fight back, knowing that the Avatar had returned to save them. Aang finally met the king at the palace. Upon meeting, the king immediately realized that the airbender in front of him was the long-lost Avatar. Aang, on the other hand, realized that the king was none other than his old friend, Bumi, after hearing his unique laugh. Unfortunately, Bumi had lived long enough and had become senile. That night, Katara was getting ready to go through the tunnel when Jet confronted her. Jet found out that she had thwarted his plan to blow up the king to achieve freedom, but Katara denied his way. The king and the people in the palace were innocent, and him killing them was wrong. Jet had enough of her and tried to attack her, but Katara was good enough to stop him by freezing his body using her waterbending. Meanwhile, Zuko had reached the prison and was looking for his uncle. Suddenly, one of the guards saw him and asked what he was doing. Zuko managed to pull up a good reason to convince the guard, and found out that his uncle was on his way to the pit, while Aang was brought to meet the king. Bumi threw a feast at the palace to welcome Aang while pulling a test for him. Aang asked him to let him go to continue his journey to the Northern Water Tribe, but Bumi didn't seem to care. Aang asked him to care about the war, and that was enough to make Bumi angry. He told him how hard it was for him to fight in the same war for a century while Aang was gone all that time. What was in Aang's mind was that his old friend had lost his hope. The next day, Katara and Sokka found the tunnel opening and began exploring the tunnel, but before long they met a group of people, setting up a camp and singing inside there. They asked about the tunnel, and a man, one of them, told them that what they thought was the tunnel was just a cave, while the real tunnel was far scarier. The man told them the story of Oma and Shu. They met on top of a mountain and became lovers, but they came from different villages that opposed each other at a war. They then found their way to meet by learning earthbending from the Badger Moles, becoming the first earthbenders, and made a labyrinth-like tunnel to meet secretly, until one day, Oma was killed in the war. Shu was devastated and, by using her earthbending, fought the war and brought it to an end. She then united the two villages, and along with them, built a new city where they lived in harmony. The city was Omashu, the monument of their love. After telling that story, the man told them a clue to the tunnel: love is brightest in the dark. Somewhere else in the middle of a forest, Iroh was on his way to the pit. They stopped at a crossing, and without the guard knowing, Iroh dropped a pay showpiece he brought to mark where he was going so that Zuko could find him. Sure enough, shortly after, Zuko found the piece. Sokka and Katara had ventured further into the labyrinth and seemed to lose their way, but Sokka convinced Katara that he knew the way. They had a small argument and remembered their time in the village before they embarked on this journey. They made up soon after and continued. Back with Iroh, the entourage stopped for a break, and the leader had a chat with Iroh. He revealed that his brother, who was also a former guard at the city, was killed during a war, and Iroh was responsible for that. He almost killed Iroh, if not because of his subordinates stopping him from doing so. He then said that Iroh knew nothing of loss. The film flashbacks to the past. It was a funeral for Iroh's son, who died a hero during a war. He was so devastated after the death of his son, and retreated from the war at that very moment, abandoning his fellow warriors. At that moment, Zuko cheered him up by giving him a charm that he received from Iroh's son. Back at the tunnel, Katara and Sokka stopped at a dead end, and they tracked back their way, only to find that the tunnel somehow had changed. They kept walking until they met another dead end, but this time, a badger mole showed up and tried to attack them. Meanwhile, Zuko finally caught up with Iroh and his guard entourage. He fought them and released his uncle from the chain. They managed to knock out all the guards, and Iroh had a chance to finish the guard that attacked him before, but he decided not to do it and left him, only to be attacked and injured. Zuko knocked the last guard and brought his uncle away from there, knowing more guards would come after them if they stayed. At the tunnel, Katara and Sokka were running for their lives from the badger mole until they reached a dead end. They apologized to each other and held hands, submitted to their fate, but the badger mole suddenly stopped. Katara realized that the badger mole was blind, and it wasn't trying to attack them anymore because they showed love. They then asked the badger mole to help them find their way to reach the palace. Meanwhile, Aang was taken to look around the palace, and Bumi kept pulling a prank at him. Bumi then brought him to the last room, where he challenged Aang to a fight. Bumi showed that he was still capable of a fight, and was strong enough to make the Avatar cornered. Bumi said how disappointed he was with Aang for abandoning the whole world during the war. He then made another test for Aang. He put himself and Aang both in danger, and asked Aang to decide whether to save him or himself, while saying that choice was the thing the Avatar had to make to save the world. Aang couldn't hold back any longer, but fortunately, his friends showed up. Sokka moved the cane from under the boulder so that Aang could let go of them. Bumi was saved, but he was disappointed, saying that Aang cheated because he wasn't supposed to rely on anyone. Aang said that he would save the world with the help of his friends. Bumi was finally convinced to believe in him. When they walked out of the palace, one of the guards told Bumi that the Fire Nation troops were on their way to Omashu to launch their attack. Aang was worried about them, but Bumi convinced him that they were ready for war, especially after Sai helped them to round up the spies in the city. He then told Aang to leave for the Northern Water Tribe, but before that, he gave Aang one more challenge: to ride one of the transport carriages like what they used to do when they were kids. Somewhere else, Zuko brought Iroh to escape from Omashu. While canoeing through the river, Zuko saw Appa, but he let him go so he could save his uncle first. He felt he owed his uncle for all the time he spent with him, for joining his journey as his friend. Aang had gotten closer to the Fire Nation's border, and the guards showed up more often. They were in a pinch, but Katara, with her new ice technique, a move she just discovered, helped them through. They immediately left when they had the chance and jumped onto Appa's back, but after flying for a while, they passed a part of the forest where there was nothing left but a remnant of a forest fire that burned everything. They landed and found out that it was all thanks to the Fire Nation. Sokka then met a kid who seemed scared of them. She tried to talk to her, but Katara scared her, and she dropped her doll before she ran away. They tried to catch her and arrived in a village. They saw how people were afraid of strangers there. They met with the kid's father and learned that since the attack by the Fire Nation, the village was short of food, and they formed a group to find another source. The man's son was with them, and they never returned since they departed. Aang realized that they were lost in the other world, the spirit world. Zuko, on the other hand, was informed by Lieutenant G that there was a sighting of ice that wasn't supposed to be. He realized that it might be Aang and his friends. Meanwhile, Azula told her father that she was impressed by Commander Zhao, who had made the impossible to find the Avatar, but her father, Fire Lord Ozai, told her that it wasn't Commander Zhao who found the Avatar, but Zuko, her brother. She didn't seem fond of the great thing her brother just achieved. Aang told Sokka and Katara that the barrier between the spirit realm and the real world was thinner in the forest, and he ventured to the woods to find the place easiest to reach the spirit world. They walked long enough until they reached a burned shrine. Ing saw a statue of a bear with scratches on its face and decided to meditate in front of it. After a whole day of meditating, Ing finally separated his soul from his mortal body, but he accidentally brought Sokka and Katara's souls with him. He thought it might be thanks to the thin barrier between the two worlds. Suddenly, they felt a pull, and moments later, they found themselves in the spirit realm. Zuko had made it to the village in the burned-down forest and asked a local bartender about a sighting of a waterbender lately. The bartender said he had heard about it, but didn't really know about it, so Zuko gave him a bag of gold, and the bartender told him about the Avatar. Some people inside the bar also saw the Avatar. Zuko was mad, knowing that many people had found out about the Avatar, and he was afraid someone would start a search party to find the Avatar. At that moment, a female mercenary showed up and greeted them. Iroh finally asked the woman for help to find Aang. Though Zuko didn't accept the idea at first, he managed to convince him. Aang and the others ventured deeper into the forest in the spirit realm, and moments later, they met a big owl who warned them not to stay longer inside the spirit realm because it would be dangerous for humans. The owl also knew that Aang was the Avatar and told him that they had to follow the path to find someone who could help them find what they were looking for. They walked further into the woods, and suddenly, a big monster showed up and scared them. Aang realized that it wasn't a monster but the spirit from the shrine, and it was hurt. Thanks to the attack by the spirit, the three of them were separated. Moreover, the spirit made a thick fog that made them even more lost. Sokka found himself talking with a fox. The fox reminded him that the monster he just saw was a spirit, and it was in pain and scared. He told Sokka that pain could change someone. After that, before it left, it reminded him that the fog could be dangerous. Katara walked further to find Aang and Sokka, but she suddenly found herself back in her village. She hallucinated about the time when her mother was still alive. The happiness was short because soon after, the Fire Nation attacked the village. Katara realized that she was recalling the past when her mother died in front of her. She refused to hide with her mother, knowing the place they were heading was the place of her mother's death, but she was forced to come. She hid under a rug and witnessed her mother die in front of her once again, and just after she recalled that traumatizing memory, a person with a mask showed up and surprised her. Sokka walked further and stepped on the mud, but when he looked down, he found the snow and realized he was hallucinating. He found himself inside the hut in his village, just after he finished his ice dodging test. His father congratulated him for passing the test, though he almost didn't make it and endangered his crew. He left the place and met some other boys who also just passed the exam and got bullied for almost failing the test. He also overheard his father mentioning how he wasn't supposed to be a leader like him. He was devastated to hear that, and before he knew it, the same person that surprised Katara showed up in front of him and surprised him. Aang found himself walking into a cave, and there he saw his home, all good and not a ruin like what it should be, but he knew it was just a hallucination and shook it off his mind. Suddenly, he was greeted by a centipede monster with a mask on its face, the same mask that came to Katara and Sokka. The monster knew he was the Avatar and said that his past incarnation had stolen something from him. Aang ran away from the cave, and when he fell, he saw a hut nearby. He entered and found Monk Gyatso there. He initially thought it was just another hallucination, but it turned out to be real. He was so happy to find Monk Gyatso after so long and hugged him tightly. Monk Gyatso told him that after the incident in the Southern Air Temple, all the monks had reincarnated, but Monk Gyatso chose to stay in the spirit realm, knowing Aang might need him, and he was proven right. Aang asked him how to be a good Avatar, and Monk Gyatso told him that he had to look inside to find that answer. Aang mentioned about the centipede monster and his missing friends. Monk Gyatso told him that the monster was a spirit called Ko, the Face Stealer. He said that Avatar Roku once had beaten Ko. Aang thought that he had to talk to Roku, just like what he did with Avatar Kyoshi, but Monk Gyatso said that Avatar Roku's temple was in the Fire Nation, and it could be a dangerous journey. Aang insisted that he had to try to save his friends. Before Aang left, Monk Gyatso said that it was a good thing that Aang wasn't at the temple when the Fire Nation attacked, because he might also get killed just like the others. He told Aang to let go of his past regret and move on. He then told Aang to hurry before Ko ate the lost souls of his friends. Aang returned from the spirit realm and asked Appa and Momo to keep Sokka and Katara's bodies safe when he left for Avatar Roku's shrine. Somewhere else, Zuko got the shocking news that his father had appointed Commander Zhao as the new admiral. He took control of the mission to hunt the Avatar, and all the ship crew decided to side against Zuko. Zuko was fed up and left from there. Lieutenant G confronted Iroh that he had had enough of Zuko's abuse and insults despite their respect and sacrifice for the 3 years they had spent hunting the Avatar. Iroh said that they didn't know anything about Zuko. Zuko had made a greater sacrifice, more than they ever could. Meanwhile, Aang had finally reached Avatar Roku's shrine. There he met a couple of sages and boldly asked them to help him find Avatar Roku's statue, but to his surprise, the sages attacked him. Aang tried to avoid their attack until someone pulled him. That someone was a sage from the shrine named Shiyu. He explained that the sages, including the Great Sage, had forgotten about the Avatar and believed Fire Lord Ozai was their true leader. Shiyu showed Aang the relics from the previous Avatars that his grandfather kept. Suddenly, the sages knocked on the door, so Shiyu decided to hold them while Aang would try to contact Avatar Roku. Aang finally met with Avatar Roku, and the Avatar seemed happy to see him. Avatar Roku told Aang that, in addition to being a warrior, just like what Avatar Kyoshi told him, an Avatar also needed to be a diplomat so they could solve a problem without hurting anyone. Aang then told him that he needed help against Ko, and Avatar Roku immediately refused to help. He said that he had stolen something from Ko, a pendant belonging to the Mother of Faces, Ko's mother. Ko wanted nothing more than a family. Aang thought it would be something Ko would want to trade for his friends. Aang thanked Avatar Roku and then left from there, but when he returned to the human world, after he took the pendant and walked out of the room, he found all the sages paralyzed. Suddenly, the female mercenary that Zoku and Iroh hired was already there. Her pet licked Aang, and that instantly paralyzed him. When he woke up, he found himself tied in a cave with the woman. He begged the woman to let him go, because he wanted to save his friends, but the woman refused. She told him that though many needed the Avatar, some of them had lost their faith in the Avatar. Soon after, Zuko and Iroh came to take Aang. Just before the woman left, she mentioned that many hunters were after Aang. On their way to their ship, Zuko remembered the past when he first took part in the War Council meeting. His father asked him the strategy he could use, but he couldn't pull a good enough strategy to win his father's heart. Instead, he opposed the general strategy that would use a division consisting of newly recruited soldiers as a decoy and called it terrible. His father felt disrespected and driven by his anger. His father challenged him to Agni Kai, a duel. Zuko hadn't yet reached his ship when suddenly he was ambushed by Zhao and his army. Zhao asked Zuko to hand him the Avatar, but Zuko refused to comply with his order. Zhao had the upper hand because he had a backup, a group of Yuan archers that he lent from Fire Lord Ozai. Zuko had no other choice but to back down. Before Zhao left, Zuko asked where he would take the Avatar, and Zhao, without any hesitation, told him that he would bring Aang to Po Wai Stronghold. After Zhao left, Zuko said that they would be able to make it faster to the stronghold if they rushed and took another way, but Iroh reminded him of the great consequences he might get if he decided to go there. Not only that the stronghold impenetrable, but it was also located inside the Fire Nation's borders, which if he went there, he would violate his banishment and his father would be mad about it. They had no choice but to let Aang go and wait for Zhao to make a mistake so they could take Aang back. In Po Wai's stronghold, Aang was put in prison and his hands and legs were chained. Outside, without anyone knowing, a masked swordman was seen, looking toward the guards. He saw an incoming horse carriage and hopped under it to pass the guards. He was slick enough to avoid the suspicion and managed to get inside the stronghold. After that, he saw a manhole and went inside it. Soon after, he reached the prison where Aang was locked and beat all the guards. He then freed Aang and led the way out of there. Unfortunately, their escape was far from smooth. After Zhao realized that Aang had escaped, he alerted all the guards and they found Aang and the masked swordsman climbing the wall. They tried to capture them, but to no avail. Aang and the masked swordsman were too strong. They managed to escape from the stronghold after the masked warrior threatened to kill Aang, which Zhao couldn't afford since the Fire Lord wanted the Avatar to stay alive. Before Aang and the masked swordsman were long gone, the Yuan archer that was hired to guard the stronghold managed to hit the mask of the masked swordsman, knocking him down. Knowing they were an easy target, Aang used his airbending to make a fog and hide their presence. Inside the fog, Aang took the mask and found out that the masked swordsman was Zuko. Aang was about to leave, but he decided to take Zuko with him. Meanwhile, Zhao asked his troops to send a search party to find Aang and kill the masked swordsman. The search party swept the area while Aang and Zuko found a hiding spot inside an abandoned shed. There, Zuko woke up and told Aang that he had a boat nearby they could use to escape. Aang attempted to make a small talk, and Zuko finally opened his heart to tell Aang that his reason to hunt him down was none other than so he could go home. Aang asked him to be different and to show compassion. He also said that Fire Lord Ozai was wrong for causing havoc and war, but that was enough to trigger Zuko's anger. Aang was forced to pin him down so he wouldn't attack him. While he was fainted, Zuko remembered the past when he had to fight his father. He begged him not to do it. Even Iroh was against the duel, but Fire Lord Ozai wanted it to happen. Zuko couldn't fight back at first, but then he had the chance to knock his father, which he didn't take because he respected him. His father pinned him down, and before launching his final attack, he told Zuko that compassion was a sign of weakness. Zuko woke up on his boat, and Aang was there, ready to push the boat so Zuko could escape from there. Aang tried once again to change Zuko's mind about the war and his father, but that didn't work. Knowing that, Aang pushed the boat and left from there. At the ship, while waiting for Zuko to return, Iroh told Lieutenant G about Zuko's past. After the duel against his father, Zuko was treated for his wounds. Soon, his father showed up to talk with him. His uncle tried to stop him, saying it wasn't the right time to speak, but Ozai refused. He knew that Zuko was holding back, and that was nothing but weakness in his eyes. He wanted Zuko to get rid of that weakness, but Zuko reasoned that a chance was something needed by the weak to get stronger, something that Ozai himself didn't give. Ozai realized that he had made a mistake by letting Zuko stay in the palace, making him grow with a weakness. He then banished him to find the Avatar, the only ticket for him to return home. He let the division that Zuko defended at the War Council meeting as his crew to find the Avatar. Lieutenant G realized the great sacrifice Zuko had made for him and his platoon. Suddenly, one of the crew saw a small canoe approaching, and it was Zuko. Upon arriving at the ship, Zuko was surprised to see his crew somehow had respect for him, something he barely saw from them. Meanwhile, Aang returned to the burned woods. He entered the spirit realm and gave the pendant to Ko, and without much longer, Ko released Sokka, Katara, and the other missing people it had kidnapped. They returned to the village to meet his family, who had been waiting for them. On the other hand, Iroh found the mask that Zuko used when he infiltrated Owai stronghold. Long story short, Lieutenant G overheard that Zuko was to be sent back to Capital City to stand trial for treason. Iroh realized that Zhao had figured out that the masked swordsman who freed Aang in Powai was Zuko, and that he convinced Fire Lord Ozai that Zuko had turned against him. Knowing there was not much time, Iroh told Zuko to leave the ship with the boat, but without them knowing, it was all nothing but a trap. The boat Zuko took to escape had been filled with blasting jelly, and sure enough, just a moment later, the boat exploded. Meanwhile, Aang and the others had made it to the Northern Water Tribe settlement, Agna Kella. The people there had been expecting them, and the chief himself, Arnuk, welcomed them warmly. They were introduced to Master Pakku, the strongest waterbender there, and Princess Yu, their priestess, as well as his daughter. Right after the introduction, Aang warned him about his vision that the tribe was in danger, but Arnuk said that they had found out about it from their scouts. He told Aang to calm down because they had prepared for the attack, and instead invited him and everyone else for a feast to celebrate Aang's arrival. At the ship, Zhao conveyed the message from Fire Lord Ozai that he was appointed to lead a great armada to attack Agna Kella, since they knew that Aang was heading there. Iroh said that it was impossible that Agna Kella was the biggest waterbender stronghold, and piercing through their wall was impossible since many had failed, but Zhao was too confident that he was the one that would lead their victory against the waterbenders. At the Fire Nation, Azula was having a sparring fight against an earthbender in front of Fire Lord Ozai, but her performance was considered below average. She was so mad about it, thinking that her father didn't want to admit that she was the best. During the feast at Agna Kelila, Master Pakku approached Katara and expressed his sympathy for the great loss the Southern Water Tribe had gone through. He then told her that he could meet Yagoda, one of the tribe's finest instructors, to practice her waterbending. Kater was so happy to hear that. On the other hand, Sokka kept staring at Princess Yu. Once she left, Sokka immediately followed her. Sokka followed her to the kitchen, where they got to know. They had a chat until one of the tribe's warriors, Han, called Princess Yu for the evening blessing. Before she left, Sokka saw the ornament in her hair that resembled the one he saw on the talking fox that he met in the spirit realm. The next day, Aang and Sokka met Arnuk and Master Pakku. Suddenly, Han asked Sokka to tell him and his platoon about the Fire Nation army, so they left from there. Meanwhile, Aang stayed and was asked about the best strategy to hold the attack. Aang said that airbending was mostly used to defend and avoid attack, not to confront it. Aang revealed that despite being the Avatar, he wasn't even ready yet. In fact, he hadn't even mastered any disciplines besides airbending, and his purpose in coming there was to find a teacher to help him master waterbending. Master Pakku realized that they couldn't rely on the Avatar for the war. Meanwhile, Katara finally met Yagoda, who was an instructor for water healing techniques. After learning about that technique, Katara asked when she could learn the fighting techniques. At that moment, she learned the fact that the Northern Water Tribe banned the female from fighting, and they had to focus on healing instead. Katara was disappointed and decided to leave. On the other hand, Sokka filled the platoon with all his knowledge about the Fire Army. After he took his time to ask about Princess Yu to Han. Han revealed his feelings towards her, and that they were betrothed, but Princess Yu broke it off when she turned 16, though she never told the reason behind her action. Meanwhile, Princess Yu brought Aang to see the statue of Avatar Kuruk, the Avatar that came from the Northern Water Tribe. Aang asked Yu if Avatar Kuruk could help him, and Yu told him that Avatar Kuruk had been engrossed with his time in the spirit realm and abandoned his people. Aang was worried, but he had no other choice but to meet the Avatar himself to find out. He then began meditating, and soon after, he reached Avatar Kuruk, who coldly welcomed him. Aang told him that Avatar Kyoshi showed him a vision that Agna Kelila would be in danger, and that he needed help from Avatar Kuruk to fight the incoming attack, but Avatar Kuruk refused to help. He said that if Kyoshi showed the vision, it would happen. The only thing that could be changed was the result of it. He also said that his soul was corrupted after a war he waged at the spirit realm, and thanks to that, he wasn't able to control the Avatar state again. At the same time, Sokka showed up. He finally found out that Princess Yu was the talking for he met once in the spirit realm, just as he expected. Princess Yu explained that she was able to venture inside the spirit realm in her dream. It all could happen because the moon spirit imbued her with some of its essence to restore her life because she was born very sick. Since then, she became the priestess of the tribe that could bridge between the human world and the spirit realm. Sokka told her the past he recalled when he was lost in the spirit realm, the harsh past that showed his father's disappointment in him. Princess Yu tried to cheer him up by saying that he was a good person who cared about those around him, and that his father must be proud of him if he could see him. She then sealed it with a kiss. Aang was told by Avatar Kuruk that being the Avatar meant being the one who bore the burden alone. He refused to help with the war. Aang then returned to the human world and told Sokka and Princess Yu that they were on their own. Meanwhile, Katara confronted Master Pakku because she wasn't allowed to fight. Pakku insisted that women should never fight, and that was the rule the Northern Tribe held. Shortly after, Aang came and Katara told him about what just happened, but Aang somehow agreed. He didn't want her to fight. He couldn't lose anyone again. On the other side, Zhao and his great armada were ready for the war. Ira reminded him that the war would be hard. The stronghold was impenetrable, and there were many obstacles, just to reach them, but Zhao was too confident. He believed that he was destined to conquer the Water Tribe with an ace in his hand. After that, Iroh talked to a guard who turned out to be Zuko in disguise. He made it through the explosion and was on his mission to find the Avatar before Zio did. Meanwhile, Azula was told to pick her opponent for a sparring fight in front of her father, but she refused to do it. She then showed her techniques that shut everyone in amazement. She wanted to test her power in the outside world and conquer other cities for the Fire Nation. At the healing huts, Katara told Sokka that she would challenge Master Pakku to a fight to prove him wrong and to prove that she was more than capable of fighting at the war. Sokka said that it was the right choice they took back then when they decided to help Aang save the world, and that he was happy that Katara took the path to prove herself. Katara confronted Master Pakku in front of his students and challenged him to a fight. Aang and Sokka were also there to watch the duel. Initially, Master Pakku refused, but Katara provoked him and he bought it. They showed their ability, and even though Katara never took a lesson from anyone, she could match Master Pakku's ability. Her perseverance won Master Pakku's heart, though he didn't admit it. The other students were amazed by her power, and she had proven her ability in front of everyone, including Aang. She said that she was ready to fight beside him in the war, against Avatar Kyoshi, Roku, and Kuruk, who said that the Avatar had to fight alone. Before long, soot began falling from the sky, and Aang knew the Fire Nation armies were close. He, along with Katara and Sokka, launched the first attack against the closest ship. They managed to bring it down, but when they saw the power of the armada they were going to face, they were shocked. Meanwhile, Zuko made a plan to infiltrate the stronghold. Iroh told him to look for a stream of warm water that could lead him to find the opening in the wall. Aang returned to the stronghold to tell what he had just seen. Arnuk decided to strengthen their wall. Aang knew it was a hard ward, but Sokka and Katara weren't ready to give up. Zhao had planned a cunning plan to get inside the wall. He showed the hot air balloon designed by their spies in Omashu, saying it was the transport they would use to get inside the stronghold while the guards were busy fighting their Navy armada. They began the attack and bombarded the stronghold's main defense with cannons, but the waterbenders, along with Aang, put up some good work stopping the fireballs, though they were still overwhelmed. Katara saw the chance to convince Master Pakku that it was time they let the women fight alongside the warriors. Master Pakku saw the determination in their eyes, and after Yagoda talked to him, he let them take part in the war. On the other side, Arnuk saw Princess Yu and asked her to hide. He wanted her to replace him if something happened to him. He then asked Sokka to take her and the children to hide. He asked him to keep the princess safe. Meanwhile, the other students of Pakku came to help Katara defend the walls. Zhao and Iroh began their way to infiltrate the defense. Iroh asked him to delay the attack until daybreak because the moon would give the waterbenders a boost of power, but Zhao refused. He knew about it. He even knew that the full moon that night was not just a common full moon, but an ice moon, a phenomenon that would greatly boost the waterbenders' power, but that vital moment gave them an advantage. He knew from the sage in the Fire Nation that during the ice moon, the barrier between the spirit realm and the human world grew thin. At that moment, the spirit of the moon, the one that gave the waterbenders their power, and the spirit of the ocean, the one that gave them their lives, became immortal and took a physical form. He knew it was the perfect plan to disturb the balance between the moon and the ocean's spirit to break the power that the waterbenders hold. He even took the knife that belonged to Avatar Kuruk with him to carry on his mission. He planned to kill the moon's spirit with the knife. Meanwhile, Avatar Kuruk warned Aang that he could sense his knife near, and he knew there was one thing that would happen. He told Aang to keep Zhao away from the moon and ocean's spirits, because he knew Zhao was targeting them. Katara showed up shortly after, and Aang told her that they had to find Sokka and Princess Yu to warn them about what was going to happen. Somewhere else, Momo saved the life of a child, but at the cost of its life. Sokka was sad to find Momo on the brink of death after being crushed by a ruin. Princess Yu knew a way to help it, so she brought Sokka and Momo to the oasis, the sacred place in the innermost of the stronghold, where the spirits of the moon and the ocean took their physical form. There, Princess Yu used her water healing technique to save Momo's life, and she made it. Unfortunately, the happiness didn't last long because the hot air balloon belonged to Zhao showed up. From the hot air balloon, Zhao, Iroh, and some armies came out, looking for the spirits of the moon and the ocean. Aang and Katara, on the other hand, were on their way to the oasis when Zuko, who managed to get inside the stronghold, stopped them. Katara told Aang to leave her to deal with Zuko, and Aang didn't hesitate to do so, knowing she was more than capable of fighting him. Aang was right because Katara could land hits on Zuko, even cornered him. At the oasis, Zhao finally found the spirits of the moon and the ocean. Iroh warned him not to tamper with the balance of the spirits, but Zhao had made up his mind to kill the moon spirit. He didn't even hesitate to say his mission, to take over the Fire Lord's throne. He then captured the moon spirit, and the moon suddenly turned red. Aang asked Zhao to stop, even offered himself to Zhao if he let the moon spirit go, but Zhao didn't even care. What he cared about was killing the moon spirit so he could become the next Fire Lord. He was about to stab the spirit, but Iroh launched the fireball to stop him. Aang tried to take the spirit away, but he was too late. Zhao took the knife and stabbed the spirit to death. At that very moment, the moon vanished and all waterbenders couldn't use their power anymore. The Fire Nation troops saw the opportunity and charged to break through the wall of defense. The warriors tried to stop them, but they were hopeless without their power. Katara also lost her waterbending, and Zuko was about to defeat him, but a fireball hit the building they were in. Aang made the decision to offer himself to the ocean spirit to drive the firebenders away from there. The water began gathering around him and formed a giant monster out of it. Princess Yu told Sokka that Aang had let the ocean spirit channel its rage through his body and allowed him to access the power of the Avatar. There was no way to save him anymore. Iroh found Zuko between the rubbles and hugged him. Zuko asked what was the monster he saw. Iroh told him that it was the ocean spirit on its wrath. He saw Aang inside the monster and tried to capture him, but his uncle stopped him, knowing it was impossible to do it. The Fire Nation ships launched their cannons to defeat Aang and the ocean spirit, but to no avail. On his escape, Zuko saw Zhao and confronted him. They had a fierce battle, but Zuko was too powerful for Zhao. When he was cornered, Zhao told Zuko that his father never wanted him back to the palace. He revealed the fact that Fire Lord Ozai used Zuko for nothing other than a stepping stone for his sister, Azula. He was sent to find the Avatar so that Azula could take the throne. Azula herself was the one who made Zhao the Admiral, the one who sent the Yuan archers, the one who became his ally. Zuko couldn't take that truth, but he stopped himself from killing Zhao. But when he turned his face from Zhao, Zhao did the cowardly move by trying to attack him. Fortunately, Iroh was fast enough to burn him in flames before he launched his attack on Zuko. The ocean spirit's rampage was unstoppable. Even all the ships weren't enough. They were swept like nothing. Princess Yu knew a way to bring the moon spirit back to life. She was helped by the moon spirit and had part of the moon spirit's life in her. She knew it was her time to return it back. Sokka could only beg for her not to do it. His leg was frozen to the ground. Meanwhile, Katara tried to talk Aang down, but she was ignored until the ocean spirit realized that the moon spirit returned. Katara asked Aang to return, and this time she was heard. The ocean spirit had finally calmed down. The aftermath of the attack was devastating. Everything was destroyed, and Aang felt responsible for it. Sokka, on the other hand, felt he had failed to keep Princess Yu safe and apologized to Arnok, but Arnok knew it was bound to time before this happened. He didn't blame Sokka for his daughter's death. Master Pakku approached Katara and said that he finally realized what the waterbenders needed to be. They had to change, and he had accepted Katara. He asked Katara to teach the new waterbenders, but Katara refused kindly because she still had the duty to help Aang. Master Pakku then gave her a necklace filled with the water from the oasis as a charm. Meanwhile, Zuko and Iroh rowed their boat away from the stronghold. Sokka and Katara tried to cheer Aang that everything that had happened was not his fault. They only had to fight what was waiting for them to save the world. Aang finally realized what Monk Gyatso meant by telling him to let go of the past. Katara told him that she would teach him to master the waterbend, and they would find a teacher for Aang to master earthbending in Almashu. Without Aang and the others knowing, the attack against the Northern Water Tribe was just a distraction. Fire Lord Ozai did all that so that nobody would stand before him when he conquered Omashu, and with the help of Azula, he finally brought Omashu to their knees. Fire Lord Ozai was told by the great sage that the Sozin's comet, the comet that came once every century, would soon pass the Earth, and that would be a boost to their firebending power and the perfect moment to conquer the world.